Have you ever reached a point where your prayers felt more like desperate cries than confident conversations with God? That place where you ask and ask, but nothing changes, and every time you open your mouth, it feels like you're just repeating the same words into an empty sky. I've been there too many times. I was asking for healing, for peace, for answers. I was pleading for something to shift. I thought that if I just asked enough, prayed hard enough, fasted long enough, maybe God would finally move. Maybe he'd hear me. Maybe I'd finally be free. But the more I asked, the heavier I felt. I wasn't growing stronger. I was growing more tired. There's a kind of weariness that doesn't come from the body. It comes from the soul. It's the fatigue of waiting, of hoping, of crying out and hearing silence in return. You wonder if your faith is broken, if maybe you did something wrong, if maybe God is holding out on you. I asked so many questions. Why isn't it happening? What am I missing? Why does it work for others but not for me? The questions didn't lead me to clarity. They led me deeper into confusion. I started focusing more on the pain than the one who could heal it. I was magnifying the problem, not the solution. And the truth hit me like a whisper. I was asking out of fear, not faith. My words weren't rooted in trust. They were rooted in panic. I didn't even realize it at the time, but I was more focused on what wasn't happening than on who God is. I had unknowingly made the mountain my obsession. I talked about it, cried about it, begged about it. I was feeding the very thing I wanted to be free from. But something shifted, not because I found better words or a deeper theology. It shifted when I ran out of strength, when I had nothing left to say, when I stopped trying to get God's attention and simply sat in his presence. I didn't come to ask for anything that day. I came because I had nowhere else to go. And in that quiet place, something holy happened. I stopped asking and I started worshiping. Worship changed everything. Not instantly, not dramatically, but deeply. It pulled me out of fear and into faith. It realigned my focus. It brought peace back into my storm. And that's why you need to stay with me until the end. Because if you've been begging, striving, and still stuck, there's another way, a better way, a way that leads to healing not just in your body, but in your soul. You don't need more effort. You need more alignment. And it begins when you stop asking and start worshiping. There is a silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels sacred. That's where I found myself. No more pleading, no more striving, just stillness. I wasn't trying to impress God with perfect words. I wasn't chasing a breakthrough. I was just there present, broken, but open. For the first time, I wasn't asking him to fix me. I was simply acknowledging who he is. And in that moment, something began to shift inside me, not with noise, not with drama, but with peace, a deep, settling peace that didn't come from answers. It came from surrender. We spend so much of our lives trying to control outcomes, trying to make healing happen, trying to force progress. But real power doesn't come from control. It comes from trust. And trust isn't loud. It doesn't beg. It doesn't perform. It simply rests. That day I stopped seeing God as someone I needed to convince, and I started seeing him as someone I could trust completely. I stopped approaching him like a transaction. I began to worship him like he was enough, because he is. Worship isn't a reaction to everything going right. It's a decision to believe that even in the chaos, God is still good. And when you worship in the middle of your unanswered prayers, something incredible happens. Your spirit starts to heal before your body ever does. That's because worship realigns your heart. It takes your eyes off what's missing and places them on what's eternal. You stop obsessing over what hasn't changed and start resting in the one who never does. There's power in that posture. When you stop needing to see the miracle before you believe, and instead you believe because of who God is, your faith deepens. It grows roots. It becomes unshakable. That kind of faith doesn't wait for circumstances to catch up. It leads them. And it's in that faith-filled space, born not from effort, but from worship, that healing begins to flow. You don't have to know how it will happen. You don't have to fix yourself. You just have to surrender. That's what worship is. It's not weakness. It's not giving up. It's handing over the weight you were never meant to carry. It's choosing to believe that God is working even when you can't see the results yet. It's trusting that he's enough even when your body, your mind, or your life feels broken. That kind of surrender sets you free. It takes you out of the prison of waiting and into the presence of peace. You stop being ruled by fear. You stop being tormented by timelines. You rise above your circumstances because your spirit is anchored in truth. And in that anchoring, healing begins slowly, quietly, deeply. Because where striving ends, grace begins. Where asking stops, worship starts. And that's the moment heaven draws near, not because you demanded it, but because your heart finally made room for it. Keep holding on to that. Something powerful is already happening inside you. Healing begins the moment you stop tying your faith to your feelings. It begins when you stop needing proof to believe and start choosing belief as your foundation. Worship brings you into that space. It lifts your eyes from your wounds and fixes them on the one who never changes. That shift alone carries more power than you realize, because worship doesn't ask for evidence. It declares truth in spite of it. When you speak truth in the face of pain, the atmosphere within you begins to change. Fear loosens its grip. Anxiety loses its voice. Doubt starts to dissolve. What you focus on, you empower. And for so long, your focus may have been chained to the symptoms, the delay, the unanswered questions. But worship redirects your attention. It breaks the cycle of waiting for something to change before you feel peace. It gives you peace now, in this moment, in the middle of it all, not because everything is fixed, but because your eyes are finally fixed on the right thing. You stop measuring God by your pain, and you start measuring your pain by God's presence. That one decision changes everything. There is a quiet kind of healing that moves from the inside out. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't always happen with lightning or thunder, but it's no less real. It starts in your thinking, in your breathing, in the way you see the world around you. Suddenly, you're not constantly scanning your body for signs of relief. You're not rehearsing worst-case scenarios. You're not waking up wondering if today will be the day you finally feel whole, because you already do, deep inside. And that inner wholeness becomes the soil where outer healing begins to grow. When you worship, you're not pretending everything is okay. You're declaring that even if it's not, God is still worthy. That kind of faith is raw. It's pure. And it releases something powerful into your life. Not because worship is a formula, but because it's alignment. It brings your spirit into agreement with what heaven already knows. You are seen, you are loved, and healing has already been set in motion. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to earn it. You simply stay in that place of surrender, of stillness, of worship, and let healing come to you. Let it rise slowly. Let it flow through you. Let it rebuild what fear tried to destroy. This is not about denying the pain. It's about refusing to let it define you anymore. Worship changes the conversation. It says, I'm not begging for change. I'm becoming it. You are not waiting for healing. You are walking in it. Every breath of praise, every whisper of trust, every moment you choose to lift your eyes, those are steps toward freedom. Keep walking. Keep worshiping. Healing is not a far-off dream. It's already within you, awakening. Healing doesn't always begin with a miracle. Sometimes it begins with a decision, a quiet, resolute choice to believe, even when nothing around you confirms it. Worship gives you the strength to make that choice. It builds endurance where there used to be exhaustion. It creates clarity where confusion once ruled. The more you worship, the less you chase outcomes. You stop demanding that the healing come your way in a specific form at a specific time. You start trusting that whatever comes, it will be good because it's coming from a good God. When you worship instead of worry, you're training your heart to let go of control. That surrender becomes the doorway to restoration. You begin to see that healing is not just the absence of pain. It's the presence of peace. It's the unshakable calm that holds you steady even while the storm still rages outside. And sometimes that's the greatest miracle of all. Not that the situation changed, but that you did. Peace isn't passive. It's powerful. It's what allows you to rise, to keep going, to speak life into yourself when everything else tries to shut you down. And that peace is born from worship, from that sacred moment when you stop obsessing over results and start honoring the presence of the one who holds the results in his hands. The shift is small, but the impact is massive. You begin to speak differently, think differently, carry yourself with quiet confidence, not because everything is perfect, but because you've learned to trust the process. That trust creates space. space for healing to unfold in ways you didn't expect. It may not be overnight. It may not be dramatic, but it's real. It's steady. It's lasting. Because healing that comes through worship isn't surface level. It doesn't just mask symptoms. It gets to the root. It heals the fear, the doubt, the wariness that was hiding underneath the physical pain. It touches the part of you that even words can't reach. That's why it matters. That's why worship is more than a song. It's a strategy, a lifestyle, a lifeline. When you choose to worship instead of worry, praise instead of panic, you begin to live from a place of victory, not victimhood. You stop measuring your worth by your weakness. You stop letting the pain speak louder than your purpose. And you start moving forward, not in your own strength, but in the overflow of His. That's where healing finds you. Not because you fought harder, but because you finally let go. You surrendered the timeline. You stopped begging for the outcome. You opened your heart and allowed worship to do what asking never could. Keep your heart in that place. Stay rooted in trust. Healing is not behind you. It's not far ahead. It's here. In this breath. In this moment. In your surrender. And if you keep worshiping through the waiting, you won't just witness a miracle. You'll become one. The most powerful faith doesn't shout. It stands. Quiet. Unshaken. Rooted in something deeper than results. That kind of faith is born in worship. Not the kind of worship that waits for everything to be perfect, but the kind that rises up when nothing makes sense. That kind that chooses to believe, not because it's easy, but because giving up isn't an option anymore. There comes a point where you stop treating faith like a transaction and start living it as a lifestyle. You stop negotiating with your breakthrough and start declaring your trust. That's when things start to change. You were never meant to chase healing like it's running from you. You were meant to walk in authority, knowing that healing is your inheritance, not a prize for good behavior. But that authority isn't found in more asking. It's found in alignment, in resting, in knowing. When you worship, you remind your spirit that what God said is still true, even when your body says otherwise. You begin to silence the inner critic that demands to know when, how, and why. And in that silence, faith speaks louder than fear ever could. Faith isn't a feeling. It's a decision. One that must be made daily, especially when your circumstances don't seem to agree. But worship fuels that decision. It lifts your eyes above what you see and anchors you in what you know. You begin to walk through the storm differently, not because it's easier, but because you're stronger. Worship doesn't remove the battle. It equips you to win it. There's a holy power in choosing to trust without needing to understand. That's what real faith looks like. It's not about pretending the pain doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let it define your truth. Worship pulls you into that truth again and again until it becomes your new default. You stop waking up wondering if you'll make it. You start waking up knowing you already have, because faith isn't just a path to healing. It is the healing. You are not behind. You are not broken beyond repair. You are being rebuilt from the inside out. Every time you choose worship over worry, trust over tension, peace over panic, you grow. You heal. You rise. Even when nothing on the surface looks different, something inside you is being made new. That kind of transformation cannot be faked. It cannot be forced. It must be allowed. And worship is the door that opens it wide. Let that door stay open. Keep choosing the posture that doesn't strive but surrenders. The posture that says, I trust you even now. That trust is your strength. That surrender is your weapon. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to prove it. You just have to live it. Healing is not something you wait for anymore. It's something you walk in. Quiet. Bold. Certain. Worship is how you keep walking, even when the road is invisible. You're not powerless. Even in your lowest moment, you still have a weapon. Worship is that weapon. Not the kind that makes noise on the outside, but the kind that breaks chains on the inside. The kind that lifts you when nothing else can. You don't need to understand everything to worship. You just need to believe that your praise carries weight even in the dark. Especially in the dark. Because the enemy wants your silence. He wants your voice buried under fear. But every time you lift your heart in worship, even with trembling hands, you take back territory. You were never called to live defeated. You were created to overcome. But overcoming doesn't always look like shouting from mountaintops. Sometimes it looks like praising with tears in your eyes. Sometimes it looks like whispering truth to yourself in the middle of the night when anxiety tries to steal your breath. Sometimes it looks like saying, "Thank you," when everything inside you wants to complain. That's what real strength looks like. It's not loud. It's consistent. Worship stabilizes your spirit when your world feels unstable. It roots you. It keeps you from spiraling into doubt. It gives you language when your pain tries to make you mute. Even when your situation hasn't changed, worship begins to shift the atmosphere within you. And that shift is the beginning of breakthrough. Not because you earned it, but because you aligned with it. You stepped out of panic and into presence. And when you stay there, everything else begins to fall into place, not by force, but by faith. There is no situation that worship cannot reach. No darkness too thick. No weight too heavy, because worship doesn't come from your strength. It draws from His. That's why you're still standing. That's why your story isn't over. That's why you're hearing these words right now, because somewhere inside your spirit is still fighting to believe, still reaching for hope, still choosing to rise when everything tells you to fold. That's power. That's faith. That's worship. And if you feel weak, if you feel tired, if you feel like you have nothing left to give, start there. Start with that. Offer it. Not perfectly. Not beautifully. Just honestly. Your worship is not measured by how strong you sound. It's measured by how surrendered you are. Give what you have, even if it's just a whisper. Even if it's just a moment of stillness with your eyes closed, saying, "I trust you." That is enough. More than enough. Worship isn't the last resort. It's the first move, the highest choice, the clearest path. Keep walking in it. Keep leaning into it. Not because your pain is small, but because your God is bigger. You've made it this far. Not just by surviving, but by worshiping. So don't stop now. Every praise is progress. Every breath of faith is breakthrough in motion. And healing will not be denied to a heart that refuses to give up. This is the moment everything begins to shift. Not because your circumstances change instantly, but because you do. You've reached a turning point, not a pressure, but a posture. You're no longer begging for breakthrough. You're becoming it. You're no longer hoping healing will find you. You're aligning your life to walk in it. That alignment doesn't start with answers. It starts with worship. It starts with honoring the one who never left, even when the silence was loud, even when the waiting felt endless. Even when nothing made sense and you had every reason to doubt, you stayed, you kept your eyes up. That alone is a miracle. Now is not the time to retreat. Now is the time to rise. Because when worship becomes your default response, healing becomes your natural outcome. You're not striving anymore. You're standing not on shifting feelings, but on unshakable truth. You're walking by faith, not blind faith, but bold faith. The kind of faith that says, even if I feel nothing, even if I see nothing, I will still worship because I know who He is. That kind of resolve changes everything. It rewrites your identity. You're not a victim waiting for a miracle. You're a vessel carrying one. Every time you choose worship, you're saying no to fear. You're saying no to shame. You're refusing to let your past dictate your future. You're telling your pain, you don't get the final word. And that declaration echoes in the unseen. It plants seeds in your future. It establishes a new normal. One rooted not in anxiety, but in assurance. One that doesn't chase temporary relief, but stands in eternal truth. This is not emotional hype. This is a holy shift. You're no longer waiting for the atmosphere to change. You are the atmosphere. Your praise breaks chains. Your surrender disarms fear. Your faith disrupts patterns that tried to keep you stuck. And this isn't about pretending to be strong. This is about finally realizing that strength was never something you had to manufacture. It was something you were born to carry. Worship reveals that. It reminds you that you're not powerless. You're not abandoned. You are backed by something greater than what's been against you. So take a breath. Feel that quiet confidence building. That's not denial. That's discernment. That's the voice of truth rising above the noise. You're not being crushed. You're being refined. You're not being overlooked. You're being prepared. And through it all, your worship is speaking louder than your wounds, louder than your questions, louder than your waiting. This is your moment to decide who you are, not based on what you've been through, but based on what you now carry. You carry presence. You carry peace. You carry power. And when you open your mouth in worship, heaven responds. Healing follows. Not because you chased it, but because you became a resting place for it. Stay in that place, that posture, that presence. This is where everything begins. And nothing can take it from you now. You were never meant to carry the weight of healing on your own. You were never designed to fix yourself through striving effort or fear. The breakthrough was never supposed to be earned. It was meant to be received. And worship is how you receive, not with force, but with faith, not through pressure, but through presence. When you worship, you shift from performance to connection. You stop asking what you need to do and start remembering who He already is. That shift changes everything. It's not passive surrender. It's powerful agreement. You're no longer wrestling with the process. You're flowing with it. There is strength in your stillness, power in your peace, not because your storm has ended, but because you've stopped letting it define you. You are no longer the one who needs constant answers to feel safe. You've become the one who trusts without needing to understand. That's a new identity. That's a healed mind. And that healing starts showing up in the way you think, the way you respond, the way you walk into each day. You're not surviving anymore. You're stepping into dominion quietly, boldly, surely. Because when worship becomes your foundation, nothing can move you from it. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be aligned. And you are right here, right now, fully seen, fully known, fully held. There is no part of you that's been overlooked, no piece of your pain that's been missed. And when you worship, you bring all of it into the light. You let go of the masks. You stop pretending to be okay. And somehow, in that raw surrender, you find a strength you never knew you had. Not because you built it, but because it was always there. Worship just uncovered it. You're not waiting for permission to be whole. You've already been given access. What you do with that access is up to you. But when you stay in worship, you live from it. You stop reacting to fear. You start responding from truth. That's how healing lasts. It's not a one-time experience. It's a continual exchange. Your weakness for His strength, your confusion for His clarity, your pain for His presence. That exchange doesn't happen through striving. It happens through surrender. So breathe again. This is not the end of your story. This is the beginning of a new one. Not written in pain, but in peace. Not shaped by fear, but by fire, refining, purifying, empowering fire. You are no longer asking for healing like a stranger trying to earn favor. You're worshiping like a son, like a daughter, like someone who finally knows where they belong. And from that place, healing flows, not because you chased it down, but because you stopped running from who you already are. Stay there, in the presence, in the truth, in the stillness. This is what real victory feels like.